All right, is everybody all set? I think we got it really good. All right. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Todd Chamberlain. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Aurora and Aurora Police Department. Thank you so much for being here. I would like to start off real quickly on acknowledging this event and what a tragic event it is. I think anytime there is a loss of life, it is impactful to every single person involved, whether that's the individual, whether that's the suspect, but I also think it goes for the entire community as a whole. I want to give you some background and some information on this incident that started early Saturday morning and evening and then folded until Sunday morning. And I want to be as detailed and concise as possible because it really is our desire and our hope to ensure that the community as a whole understands what their agency, what their law enforcement agency is doing, how they are doing it, and why they are doing it. If I could, I'd like to do just a quick introduction and some background on how we even got involved on this. So again, this without question was an incredibly dangerous situation that was evolving quickly. Our officers received a radio call for help from a person, actually two individuals who called our police department and Aurora 911 and said that there was an individual who was armed inside of an apartment building, and this individual had beaten his mother profusely, caused some major injuries, some major problems. The individuals who were also residents of that same apartment said that they attempted to intervene on behalf of the mother, at which time our suspect took out a handgun, brandished it on the mother, and then also brandished it on the two individuals that tried to stop the action. The individuals, the roommates, left the apartment. They contacted Aurora 911 and basically made the statement that there was an individual inside the location threatening them and threatening their mother, his mother, and they also felt that the mother was not at will to leave. So basically, she was being held against her will inside this complex. I want to give you more than just my verbiage of the statement. I want to actually play an audio recording of the actual radio call, so it gives you some context of how and why Aurora PD responded to this event. If we could play that real quickly.
October 19, 2024, 23:15 and 34 seconds.
911, what's the address of the emergency? Hello, 911?
Aló, habla Juan.
Un momento, por favor, no puede.
Please select the language you need. For you selected Spanish. You will be connected to the next available interpreter. So that your interpreter may better assist you, please speak in short, clear statements.
Good evening, my name is Alma Spanish interpreter 33167. Please go ahead.
911, what's the address of the emergency?
No, vean, ¿cuál es la dirección de la emergencia? La dirección de la emergencia es 1986, Starbucks Way, apartamento, edificio 24, apartamento 201. Hay un chip armado en el apartamento en el edificio 24, apartamento 201. Está armado, tiene un guante puesto, con arma, le partió la boca a la mamá. It's 1986 Starbucks Way, building 24, apartment 201. There's an armed man on apartment 201, building 24. He has a weapon, he has a glove on, and he broke his mom's head.
He did what to his mom's head?
¿Qué le hizo a la cabeza de su mamá? Le partió la boca a la mamá, salió por la ventana amenazando a nosotros los vecinos con el arma. Tiene un arma, tiene un guante puesto. Dentro del apartamento donde después que la mamá acabaron de lograr dos inquilinos que viven también en la casa de trabajar. Permítame. He broke the mom's mouth. He's hitting the mom right now. He left through the window and he started threatening the neighbors or us. He started threatening the neighbors around him, and he's wearing a glove with his firearm, and he's also fighting the rent that's in there. He just arrived from his job.
Okay, and what kind of weapon does he have?
¿Qué tipo de arma tiene? No, como una pistola pequeña. Es como una orquesta. Acá tiene una chacera con el arma. Acabaron de siempre. Nosotros acabamos de llamar a los civiles de la señora, escucha las preguntas. ¿Dónde está él ahorita? Ahí en el apartamento. Inside his apartment.
Okay.
So again, I wanted you to hear that radio dispatch because that's what our officers heard. Basically, that call came in roughly around 11:15 p.m. And the officers were basically informed all the information that you could see. Obviously, it had to go to a Spanish interpreter. Our victims were Spanish speakers in this event. Aurora 911 translated that, and then it was subsequently dispatched to our police officers. As you could tell from the voice, as you could tell from the description, this was without question an imminent, life-threatening situation where someone has been mistreated, someone has been victimized, and unfortunately that person being mistreated and victimized was not only the individuals on the call, but it was also our suspect's mother, to a point to where the individuals who called felt that the mother was not even allowed to leave the apartment. So with that, our officers were dispatched at 11:20, and they ultimately arrived at 11:28. Based upon the situation, our officers met with the individuals who called Aurora 911. They gathered additional information, verified the fact that the suspect did have a weapon. At first, they didn't know if the weapon was real or if it wasn't real, but the suspect actually placed a magazine into the weapon and then it somehow either racked a round into it or made some really furtive, aggressive movements to show that it was, in fact, a real weapon. All of this time, he was also involved in the beating and mistreatment of his mother, as well as threatening them. So when they left, our officers made contact with them again out in the street, gathered all this information based upon the circumstances, based upon the high propensity of violence. Our officers went ahead and requested what is known as a bear, which is an armored vehicle. And our officers set that bear up in a position to where they could keep an eye on the front of the complex and in the apartment where the hostage was being held or our victim was being held. And they started to try to communicate. This communication went both telephonically and it also occurred via a bullhorn. So there was two means of communication. It went out in both English and it also went out in Spanish. And so we had a Spanish speaker who could do both different languages. There was a real fear on behalf of the officers inside that there was really going to be grave harm to the mother. And so the officers actually at the bottom of the apartment complex set up what's known as a rescue team. The bear was also used as a rescue vehicle to make sure that if and when someone came out, they could be placed in a position that would allow them to have concealment and to avoid being harmed. So all these things were put into place before this continued to evolve and escalate into the situation that we unfortunately are here talking about. After a brief time of the communication, which again occurred roughly around 12:58, several attempts, at 1 o'clock, the mother exited the apartment complex. It was on a second floor landing. She walked down the steps. Our rescue team was down at the bottom of the steps. They immediately exposed themselves for her safety and for her well-being. They grabbed her, pulled her off to the side of the apartment complex. Once she was safe, our officers started to get more additional information from her. Probably within about 30 seconds, our suspect presented himself at the doorframe of his apartment and immediately started to fire on our officers. He fired at the bearcat, or the bear, and I have photos over here of several different locations where he struck the bear. And again, this was occupied by police officers and law enforcement. Once these rounds struck, once the suspect decided to make that incredibly aggressive and dangerous and life-threatening move, our officers immediately responded, fired several rounds, at which time the suspect was struck. He fell down into the doorway at the apartment complex on the second level. Our officers again put themselves in grave danger by moving forward to try to make sure they understood where this individual was, how bad was he hurt, or was he hurt at all. When they approached, they saw the suspect laying on the ground. They saw blood. They immediately started life-threatening actions to try to help him, to try to save him. So they immediately started to apply compresses. They started to apply additional things to try to keep him alive. He was subsequently transported by a rescue ambulance, and he subsequently died. The one thing I wanted to be very clear on here, and I hope it resonates, and why I took the time to, again, show the video of the communications calls, because, again, these officers, this is something that they were requested to go to. This was a situation where a community member felt in such peril and such grave harm and such grave danger, not only for themselves, but for the actual suspect and the suspect's mother, who was going through this process, that they had to call law enforcement. Again, I think if you think the number of times that you've personally called law enforcement, I think it's very thin. For someone to call law enforcement, it really takes an incredible event, and this was, without question, an incredibly dangerous, life-threatening event. So these officers, well aware of the situation they were rolling to, responded to this. They put themselves in that position, and they tried to de-escalate this with every means possible. They used communication. They had less lethal tools. They used the cover and concealment of an armored vehicle. And again, all of this came to an unfortunate conclusion when our suspect made the conscious decision to engage our officers, to jeopardize not only their lives, but the lives of the community members in and around that incredibly dense apartment complex. So again, in closing, I just want to say, we wanted to do everything we can possibly do to show you every dynamic step of what is going on and what we know so far in this investigation. This investigation, without question, is continuing to evolve. We are going to make sure that the officers, all of the officers involved in this incident, followed policy and procedures, and also are within the parameters of the legal guidelines of the state of Colorado. We want to make sure, again, that all this information, as it becomes more available, as more details become available, we will supply you with whatever is requested, whatever is needed. Because again, I want to really just close this with a closing thought, and that is, our officers truly, whether you agree with them, whether you don't, we are here to serve. We are here to serve the community of Aurora and the citizens of Aurora. And we take that responsibility incredibly, incredibly to our hearts. It's not something we want to do, it's our duty, it's our obligation, and these officers demonstrated that. On that evening, they knew what they were heading into. They knew they were heading into a situation where there was an armed individual who was beating somebody drastically, victimizing somebody, and victimized other peoples, and they still stepped forward when most everybody else would step back. These officers did this on behalf of the department, they did it on behalf of the community, and they did it on behalf of those victims. And again, that is what we do. We try to do our best. We try to make sure that we use everything we can possibly do to resolve situations effectively, to resolve them without harm, to resolve them without injury. This, unfortunately, based on the actions of the suspect, who didn't want to take any of those offers, didn't want to take any of the de-escalation matters, wanted to continue to try to victimize other people like he had victimized those people in that apartment, stepped forward and immediately engaged our officers with shots. Shots fired at them, not in the air, not around, not just some subliminal place, but actually at our officers. And for that, again, it's unfortunate, it's tragic, but I want to leave you with this, is that our officers tried everything they could possibly do. We will continue to try to do everything we can possibly do. And we are, without question, here to serve the community of Aurora and the citizens and the people that are being victimized. With that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Chief, fair to say the suspect's mom was considered a hostage or not?
I think it's fair to say, yes, she wasn't able to leave based upon the information that we got from the radio call. And again, we tried, they went on scene, they tried to contact, and one time the person picked up the phone and then hung up immediately. Limited response to the bullhorn. Why or when she was released by him, we can't answer that question. That's something that, again, the investigation is going to continue to unfold as they interview her at much more length. Obviously, it's a tragedy for her on so many levels, I think. I think probably a lot of people in here are parents. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to lose a son or a daughter in a situation like this. But I also couldn't imagine what it would be like to be victimized by your own children to the point to where they're beating you with a handgun. So again, I think when you look at her situation, I think it's incredibly complex. But again, that's what occurred and unfolded. Yes?
At one point, it sounded like someone said her head was broken, but then at another point it sounded like her mouth was broken. What did it sound like to you?
Head and mouth, basically being beat. We don't know to the extent at that point. That was the information that was supplied by the people who were originally in the apartment with the mother and with the suspect. They left, and both of them left, and that's when they called and gave that information to law enforcement. Again, we're still in the process of the investigation. That's being looked at and reviewed. And again, all the information that we respond to is based upon what was supplied, and that's what was supplied to the officers.
But you heard head and mouth?
Yes.
Are you able to share more about what was said over the PA system
Yeah, and again, that's all going to be released as the investigation continues to unfold, because obviously our officers all have body-worn video. And so on that body-worn video, you can hear the officers articulate out in Spanish as well as in English. Please step out of the location. Please put your hands on top of your head. Please release your mother. All of those kind of things I don't know verbatim, but in a context, that's generally the conversation that unfolded.
You said he was fired from his job earlier in the day. Did you have a call for service at that location of this individual?
I don't know any information about him being terminated from a position or a job, so I'm sorry if I've not heard that information at all.
I may have misheard it.
Okay.
Chief, earlier, in a separate situation, you addressed the impact on the community, and this revolves around ultimately an 18-year-old. Any thoughts on that, just the age, how someone that young, I know legally, but how someone young comes into contact with, a weapon, that sort of thing, obviously the end result, very young person.
Yeah, again, you don't know, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to interview him. We're not going to have that information. Based upon what we heard from the victims, he seems like he does have, without question, a propensity toward violence. At one point, there is a protective order against him that was issued by, I believe, another state. I believe it was out of state, but again, it shows that this individual, for whatever reason, may or may not have anger management problems. I don't know. But he is an adult. He definitely made adult decisions on this event. Beyond just the victimization, I think the fact of when you look at the confrontation to law enforcement, why someone would do that, what they were thinking, I don't know. I don't know what was going on in his mind. I can't even begin to know what was going on in his mind. That's a decision that he made. Any other questions?
Do you know if Aurora officers had made contact with him before with their previous history?
Yeah, I don't have that right now, but from what I know initially, I don't think there was a lot of contact. So I don't know. This could have just been a one-time event, or there could have been others, but right now I'm not sure, and it's something we're still looking into.
I know there probably wasn't time between when mom exits the apartment and shots were fired. Did later she express that he had intentions to do that?
There was no discussion on his part from the time that the mother came down the landing and our officers rescued her and pulled her off to the side. He immediately stepped up to the doorway almost and then engaged the officers, just started shooting. And for what reason? Again, I think more details will hopefully come out as the investigation continues to evolve and we get more witness statements and maybe some more statements from the mother. But right now, anything I would say in regards to that, I know he didn't make any statements at the top of the landing towards law enforcement. There was no approach by him to say, okay, I'm coming out or any of that. His only statement was he stood at the top of the landing and fired shots at the officers.
Would his mother later not be surprised by that?
Again, I don't know. I'm not in the family dynamics of that family. I don't know their situation as far as what they do in behind their closed doors, like so many of us don't know what goes on behind closed doors. But I know that night, that was a tragedy, without question.
What's the name of the officer who shot him?
I don't have that name right now, and I'm not going to release it until we get a review and he gets interviewed first.
And was it just one officer?
It was one officer, yes.
Timeline on the releasing body cam?
Well, we have to show it to the family first, so we have to show it to the mother, and then there's a statute within the state of Colorado. There's a certain time limit that we'll definitely meet, and it's based upon the mothers observing that and family members observing it, and then we'll be releasing that video in a video as well from the department, as well as anything that you would like to gather from it.
We heard the call was in Spanish, but can we confirm that the family, the mother and the son were Hispanic?
From the information we got, yes, they immigrated to this country in 21. So we do know that they were Spanish speakers. And that's, again, why we started even with the PRs. The Spanish speakers also immigrated to this country, and they were Spanish speakers only as well.
Do we know where they're from?
Venezuela.
Any info on the weapon itself that the 18-year-old used in terms of how it was gotten, whether or not it may have been stolen or otherwise?
Yeah, that's going to be a whole tracking that has to be done. Our CSI went out to the location. They did locate the weapon. They located several casings on the upper landing of the apartment complex outside the door. And again, that weapon we'll have to verify through serial numbers, where it was obtained, who obtained it, was it taken in a crime, was it not taken, did the mother own it? All that is going to have to come out as the investigation unfolds.
Do you know if the suspect lived with his mother or was he visiting?
He lived with the mother. Any other questions? Again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here. I truly appreciate this on behalf of Aurora PD, the fact that we can get this information out and that the community can have better understanding of what our officers are confronted with, what a tragic event this was, and again, how we hope through education and communication, people that put themselves in this situation will think differently and look at other alternatives. Thank you very much.